we brought about, and finally a very good law has come into being. The 91st Amendment to the Constitution, limiting the size of the Council of Ministers. Earlier we used to have jumbo jet ministries. We used to have 90 ministers, 98 ministers at one time in UP. In Andhra Pradesh, 90 ministers in Anjaya cabinet. Even in one of the northeastern states, 44 of the 46 ruling party members were ministers. The other two were Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Literally, that was the case. So, again, we persuaded the system to amend the Constitution to limit the size of the Council of Ministers to 15% of the lower house. Today, that's operational. Similarly, strengthening the anti-defection provisions. Earlier, in the name of split, they used to defect at will, but today they have to resign. If you notice, when they defect, now they are resigning and contesting again for by-elections, etc. And then the local courts law, Gram Nyayalayas law. A law has been enacted to ensure that speedy justice is possible for simple cases through summary procedures at the local level. Easily accessible and inexpensive justice. It's not yet operated upon in many states. Like AP, for instance, despite the law, the courts have not been constituted. Because there are so many things to be done. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. The 97th Amendment to the Constitution, she talked about the cooperatives. Cooperative autonomy is one thing very dear to me for all my life. I was in cooperatives and I worked with Kurian, the late Varghese Kurian, one of my great heroes, for long to make this happen. Eventually, I was privileged to be able to pilot this 97th Amendment to the Constitution. It became a law in 2012. The Constitution is amended today. I can go on and on. But the point is, we have to systematically address the root causes of the problems. And if you want to really have clean politics, you must address these three problems that I mentioned: citizenship, education, service delivery, and therefore today a service guarantee bill is coming. The Parliament actually asked me to draft a bill because they were thinking of two different bills. Each department is an empire. Each fellow wanted its own body, its own hyper-powered structures. I insisted on convergence. Therefore, at the request of the Parliament, a bill has been prepared. Almost certainly in the current parliamentary session, that will be introduced in Parliament and will become a law. And therefore, for the first time, you'll have timelines for every service to be delivered, and compensation payable to the citizen for every day's delay if it doesn't get it on time. If that's actually, once that is truly implemented, there will be a near revolution in the way a government functions. It will take time for it to actually have an impact, but that will change things in a dramatic way. Similarly, you have to work on decentralization of power. I've been fighting very hard, but this is my least successful intervention. However hard you try, the IAS officers and the MLAs in states, they simply hate decentralization. So we are now trying a variety of innovative means by which, by stealth, or at least in bits and pieces, you can get some decentralization of power. But all these are not sufficient, because had we done these things 50 years ago, they would have been sufficient. But today, politics has gone too far. There's money power, criminality, dividing people, and freebies. We need to do this and more. It has to be done at two levels. One is bright young people, men and women of competence and integrity and commitment and passion. You must be willing to spend some time at least understanding these issues, playing a creative role. Doesn't mean that you all have to become political parties members and become MLAs and MPs and contest for elections, no. Those who have the time and inclination and the resources and the opportunity, by all means, but it doesn't have to do with politics with a small p. Start with the community. First register as a voter. Then vote. By all means vote, and vote sensibly. Not vote irrationally for a caste or because somebody is likely to win. Just show your strength that we want a different kind of India. If 10% people show that, 15% people show that, that will be the beginning of change. Consistently. And then work in the mohalla, work in the ward, work in the village, wherever you can. Work in schools to improve the PISA scores, for instance. Work in the mohalla to see how public money is spent and how people actually get the services on a day-to-day basis. Learn more about how to get this service delivery, what is happening, how to make it happen. Learn from the best practices. Keep at it. Understand the bigger changes required in a whole state or a city and force the pace of change in the city. Why should CCTV cameras in Dilsukh Nagar be dysfunctional? There were 2 CCTV cameras. Both of them dysfunctional. One, nobody knows why or how. It's in disrepair. The other because the hard disk or something is missing, it was not operational. True. And therefore, you had no means of verifying or identifying the fellows. You have to now find other means. How absurd in 21st century? It's not a big thing. Supposing we make that an issue, let there be adequate number of CCTV cameras to monitor our traffic and also our security, and let there be some monitoring of these CCTV cameras themselves. And if something goes wrong, instantly put it back again in place. It's these small things, systematically addressed, that make a difference, not some grand things. And look at the bigger picture in the whole state. How do you get, if a Lokpal bill indeed comes today, a Lokpal will become a reality at the national level, but because the bungling of our own civil society leaders, because they didn't know how to fight, and because they were more interested in television cameras and emotion rather than practical outcomes, we lost a huge thing, namely Lokayukta for the states. Real problem is in states. Now in states, how do you make that happen? How do you use our ability? Your service guarantee bill, I have actually drafted for the states also at the national level. The Parliament Act contains that. It's good enough for the state. Supposing they delete that again on some pretext or other, how do you make it happen in the state and the city? So it's this kind of deep understanding and systematic work to make things happen. And the much larger picture. If you really want to change India, we have to look at political parties and the political culture be completely refashioned. Unless a different class of citizens will come back to politics and run the political parties, because it's a very hard work. In a country where we have so many divisions, we have no ability to work collectively as a people, except in a family or in a caste group sometimes, or in an economic group with a common economic interest like a trade union or a professional group, where you all have the same economic goals. Outside of these three spheres, Indian people are notorious. They do not know how to work together. They do not know how to reconcile differences. They exaggerate minor differences and make it into major so-called principal things. They convert a fetish into a principle. There is a cultural problem. Now, unless a new class of young people come in with a new culture and learn to work together, reconcile differences, and make democracy work first within their groups, within political parties, and unless you're willing to become leaders, unless there is an opportunity for young people to become leaders without having to wait for 30 or 40 years, or without being a son or daughter of a politician, you cannot change the political culture. David Cameron, who is now in India, 10 years ago he was an unknown person. He was a backbencher. But he was a capable man, and he had a vision for his country and his party. And the systems are such that this young man, unknown person, could become the leader of his party and therefore the leader of the country without having any seniority or without being the son of anybody particularly well known. So is the case with Barack Obama. 10 years ago, Barack Obama was virtually unknown in the United States. He was a nobody. And yet, he could become a senator, and more important, he could become the nominee of his own party against the wishes of the majority of the leadership. Because the system is created in such a manner, if you are bright, if you can persuade your fellow countrymen, you can become the leader in your own party. And then the President of the United States, now second-term president. Can you think of anybody in this country who is unknown, who doesn't have 100 crores in his bank balance, minimum, who is not the son or daughter of a prime minister or a chief minister or a major politician, who simply is competent, intelligent, hardworking, is willing to pay the price necessary for the country, and he wants to really be a leader? Do you really think of any situation where in India such an opportunity comes? So we have to prove that our parties function differently. And once you do that, and once people start appreciating it and voting for that, initially there will not be any great successes, because we have created a huge barrier. Unless you get to vote at this level, you can't get elected. And once if you're at this level, there's no value for that vote. And therefore, even the people who would like to vote for you, they actually switch loyalties. Nevertheless, you have to fight. You have to overcome disappointment, because this is your country. You're trying to set things right in your country. Out of passion, out of love, out of depth and understanding, and innovation and dynamism. But simultaneously, you must also change these barriers. These barriers will be changed not because the political parties and the leaders of the country are very wonderful people or wise people, but because they are selfish people. but because they know their self-interest. Today, Congress and BJP are in deep trouble in the country. In the 6 largest states of India, in UP, Bihar, Bengal, Tamil Nadu, both parties don't exist. In Andhra Pradesh, BJP never existed. Congress is now out at this point in time. It may change a little bit later. We don't know. But as of now, they're out. In Maharashtra, both the parties, without their allies, they have no real survival. And these 6 largest states, these are the 6 largest states of India in population terms. They account for 291 parliament seats. That means Congress and BJP are inconsequential in 291 out of 542 parliament seats. Therefore, now they have a reason to look at things. Look, we are in trouble. If you find an answer to them, a satisfactory answer, which is good for the country and good for them, and push the system, then big change can happen. And that change is proportional representation. Once you require that number of votes and 1 vote more than any other rival in one constituency, you created a huge barrier. You created money power to get the marginal vote. And the best and brightest are scared because they can't afford to spend money of this kind, and success is not at all certain. In fact, it's less than certain. And every other bad consequence follows. But supposing a party gets seats in proportion to the votes it gets in a whole state, the barrier is lower. You still have to have a barrier, because otherwise every caste will become a political party. A reasonable threshold, let's say 5 or 10% in a state is required minimum to count. And then you get seats in proportion to your votes. Therefore, if you get 10% votes, you get 10% seats in the state. You don't require to get 40 or 45% votes in one particular constituency. The whole incentive is altered for the political party, for the candidate, for the voter. The best can now come in. They become electable. The best are today electoral liabilities. Whereas in an altered system, they actually become electoral assets. Parties which are now marginalized, like Congress and BJP in large states, they can now be in contention because they can get their 10% vote because they have the footprint. That 10%, once it has a value, then they can continue to build the parties and have national politics rather than sectarian politics. In every which way, you can rejuvenate the country. You must think of practical, tangible solutions. Something impossible that will not happen, there's no point wasting your breath. But something eminently possible within our system, you must then act as catalyst to make change possible. I'll conclude with saying this one thing. Do not despair. There's a lot that is happening in the country. Some of it is bad, a lot of it is good, not everything is bad. But if you understand, if you apply your minds, just as you apply to the computers, to software, to engineering, to medicine or something else, logically, systematically, based on evidence, you find solutions. Statecraft and nation building is exactly that. It is understanding what are the critical levers and how to make them work. Understanding what are the reasons, what are the consequences of certain failings in certain sectors, and how do you address them. It's not something different, and you all already answered why it's important for us to address this. We have to pay attention not because we are saints, not because we are some moral beings, but because we are practical human beings. Because no matter how successful you are in personal lives, being IIIT graduates, you'll have very satisfying and very successful professional careers. You'll make lots of money. Some of you will become entrepreneurs. You'll make tons of money. You'll build a mansion of a home because we all want to have some nice things in life. That's your dream, and you are entitled to that. But no matter how rich and powerful you think you are, no matter how big a mansion you build, even Mukesh Ambani's 4,000 crore stupid mansion, where nobody in the world dared to do that, only this man did it. Even if you build something like that, the mosquito that bites the neighborhood urchin in the slum will still enter your home. The mosquito will not stop at your doorstep and say, here is a IIIT graduate, let's not enter this house. It will not bother about your rank, your money, your prestige, your status, your power. Because you know what? Mosquitoes are truly socialist. The mosquito has only one dharma, that is bite you, suck your blood. In the process, it may release the virus or the parasite into your bloodstream through the saliva. But that's your problem. And therefore, no matter how successful we are, we need to control the mosquitoes together, because I can't control from my home alone. So understanding or caring for or paying attention to or participating in politics and public affairs is not an act of great sacrifice or nobility. It's an act of common sense, because we need each other. We have to simply improve our public domain with our public money, because even Ratan Tata cannot do things on his own. Even Mukesh Ambani cannot spend money to build a road for himself. We all have to do things together. And that's all what politics is about, common sense. And obviously we require effective politics, we require good outcomes, we require sensible strategies, we require very balanced sense of priorities, we require wise and competent and most of all committed leadership with integrity. And if we don't pay attention as citizens, as voters, as participants, as partners, as players in the economic growth of this country, people with stakes in the future, then we pay the price. Our complaints will not help. We have to channelize our energy creatively and constructively. And we have an opportunity as never before, because we have the resources as never before. We have the technology as never before. You are in the field of technology. So don't despair. Many of these things can be addressed very easily. As somebody said, it was not that Lincoln's time things were fantastic. Even today, it's not that America things are fantastic. There are problems. But we have to keep at it to try and solve these problems. I'm sure you'll all play that creative role. And I'm sure if we do things right, in the next few years, not in another generation, we'll actually put the right instruments and institutions in place. Then we have a lot of hard work to do to actually achieve the kind of outcomes that we want. But before that, we require the track. That's what transformation of our political system is about, and governance system is about. Without the track, the train cannot go at all. With the track, still the train has to move. To reach the destination, you still have to work hard. But first the track. And that's what clean politics with effective outcomes, sensible governance is about. And that's what you all have to play a role, not out of some sense of great moral fervor, but out of practical sense of patriotism. I'm sure you'll do that, and I'm sure you'll succeed as citizens and as human beings, and you'll stand tall and proud, not ashamed and undignified. You don't have to answer why India is 73rd out of 74 countries. I'm sure you can easily achieve the top 10 position if we put our heads together in the next few years. Actually, we can, in the next 3 or 4 years, we can make it in the top 10 easily. And that's the kind of dream you must have. Because the demand side is strong. Because people want better education. Even rickshaw pullers are willing to spend money disproportionate to their income to get their children a chance. Therefore, if we fail, it's not because the people are foolish or the youngsters are not bright. It's because we haven't designed our education at school level, or for that matter, college level, in a sensible manner to get productive outcomes. And how tough is that challenge really? Is it so difficult? Once we understand what it is and break it into components and systematically implement it, that's the kind of approach in every sector. Do it, change the country, it's well within your grasp, and be partners in this change. I wish you all the very best. We have about half an hour or so for questions. Now, fire away. Whatever you feel like.
Why people are not voting for good people?
Pardon?
Why people are not voting for good people? Like Lok Sabha Party, why people they are not aware of the Lok Sabha Party is good? Why people are voting for Jagamohan Reddy even if people know that he is corrupt person? So are people are bad or they are not knowing about the situation?
It's a very good question. It's a very complicated situation. First of all, you have what is called the first past the post system. What is the meaning of electoral success in our country? If you get one more vote than any of the rivals, then you win. If you get one less vote, then you lose. There are no second prizes. It's a winner-take-all system. Therefore, Lok Sabha or some other entrant, however good and well-meaning and respected it is, in a situation where already two parties are entrenched, the people's perception is that I am a nice guy, I want to vote sensibly, but all of them are useless, they won't vote rightly. Actually, you go and talk to people, they all say, Villanta panikararu sir, Villanta vote sir, dongal sir villu. వచ్చే టైం మాకు కొంచెం మీకు రావాలి సార్. We always tend to think that somebody else is guilty. And therefore, because we have despaired of people doing the right thing, we also don't do the right thing. And therefore, we choose among the two top contenders. Therefore, the voting in India is not about choosing the best candidate or party. It is about choosing the second worst candidate or party. For fear of getting the worst fellow elected, we vote for the second worst and we ignore the third, fourth, fifth, even if they're outstanding. That's the logic of this everywhere in the world, not only in India. Even elsewhere, where the first past the post system is there, the third party cannot easily come up. And that's the problem, particularly Herculean in India, because the poverty and many other considerations. Then why are they voting for Jagan? It's a very important question. If you really believe in democracy, that it will work in this country, and honestly, it is impossible to justify why people vote for Jagan. But look at it a little deeper. You don't bother about what people say about corruption, etc. Look actually about outcomes and the situation as the people understand. Corruption, people have come to believe that all the traditional parties are equally guilty. Your and my talk that somebody is particularly more guilty because it's more brazen and really bad, that's not carrying conviction. Because they see at the local level, every legislator of the traditional party is completely steeped in this corrupt machinery. I have gone for the by-election campaign in one of the district towns some months ago, where in the district headquarters, it was Jagan's fellow, for earlier Congress and later Jagan's fellow who was there. In the neighboring constituency, a Congress MLA who is a minister is there. In another constituency, a TDP fellow is there. A prominent TDP fellow is there. Now, there was a drinking water scheme for that district town under execution. Each of these three MLAs from three different political parties demanded 15% of the total cost of the project to be paid to them to allow the pipeline to be laid in their constituency. People know that locally. You and I may not know here. And therefore, they think that all these rascals are equally corrupt. Corruption is an equalizer. Your talk and my talk that one party is worse is not really cutting ice. Because your grand corruption, somewhere something happening, I'm not bothered, but I know what is happening here every day. If corruption is not an issue, then what is the other issue? What is Jagan's message? My father gave you all these things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He is my father. Fact? He gave all these things. Fact? He died in an accident. Fact? I am his son. Fact? Please vote for me. Simple linear logic. What is Congress saying? Yes, Rajashekhar Reddy gave this, but he gave his our man. I am also giving that. I will also give. It doesn't have the same appeal. Much of the Congress base has shifted there. Why? Because Rajashekhar Reddy perfected the art of freebies more than any other politician in India. Some 8 crore benefits have gone to people directly. 2 crore 30 lakh ration cards, white ration cards entitling people to 2 rupees are now 1 rupee rice. They actually have gone to people by so-called saturation coverage. Without much fuss, without much corruption, because nothing else happened, but this was driven. This is the center of their politics. Therefore, at any cost, people must get it, the so-called saturation coverage. There was no real selection. Practically everybody got it. In a population of 8.4 crore, 2.3 crore families got it. That means if per family you assume 4 members, which is reasonable, 9.2 crore people got it out of 8.4 crore population. Subsidized rice, 2 rupee or 1 rupee rice. And all these cardholders also got Aragyasri. It didn't improve health, but there's a perception that if I am sick, I can go to a corporate hospital at 0 cost to myself. I can get a 1 lakh rupee reimbursement from government. There is that belief. Then pensions, 70 lakh people, they're getting pensions. Almost every old age person, every widow, every physically handicapped person. Fee reimbursement, 40 to 50 lakh youngsters in colleges. Education stinks. Third-rate education, who cares? But I'm getting fee reimbursement. I go to college, I get a certificate, I get fee reimbursement. Or Pavala Vaddi for the women's groups. Loan waiver, 95 lakh farmers got loan waiver. Delhi gave it, but it has gone on to Rajashekhar Reddy's account in the public mind. You can go on and on. So total benefits are 8 crore. Out of 2 crore families, per family 4 benefits, tangible, real, but short term. They didn't change anything. They don't change human condition, they don't change poverty, but who else is doing anything else after all? Is somebody else offering a better vision? Realistically? No. What is Chandrababu Naidu saying? I did not do many of these things, but believe me now, I will also do those things. So, where is the alternative discourse? Therefore, if Jagan is now seen to be the dominant political player, it may or may not last long. The point I'm making is it's actually logical. In a very illogical, irrational situation, this is a very rational response of the people. Without understanding that, we are saying people are useless, they're foolish, they're voting like this, because you made them vote that way, because they don't have any other dream. They don't have a dream that their kids will get a chance like you. They don't have a dream that their families will get decent health care. They don't have a dream that they will come out of poverty and they'll have the earning capacity with skills and jobs. They don't have a dream that the police station they'll be treated equal to anybody else and therefore their rights will be protected. They don't have a dream that in a court of law they'll get justice quickly and fairly. And therefore the only dream they have is, I have my ration card, I have my 2 rupees or 1 rupee rice, I have some other free thing. Of course I don't grow, but savakunda patakunda Trishanku Swargam. Somewhere between life and death, you are perpetually suspended. That much is assured. Therefore, to me, this is a very important testing ground. And the rest of India is following suit. After Rajshekhar Reddy's experiment, which nobody else did to perfection, NTR tried it, MJR tried it, but Rajshekhar Reddy took it to pinnacle. Every state now is emulating this experiment. Mindless freebies, reckless freebies to get the vote. Let the country be doomed. Let your future be sealed. It doesn't matter. But vote at any cost. Today, these fellows are thinking of a so-called Food Security Act, where 78% of Indian people are sought to be given practically free rice and wheat. They are admitting that 78% of people are starving, 90% of rural people, and more than 50% of urban people are supposed to be given practically free rice and free wheat. And they are saying it's a great measure of social security because our hearts are bleeding for the poor. And much more. Last night I was watching Amartya Sen and Montek Singh Ahluwalia on this food security. I watched only for a couple of minutes. But again, they were waxing eloquent about this kind of a thing. So what happened in AP is now becoming the norm in India. Therefore, the danger is very fundamental. India could slide back dramatically if we don't change this course in the next few years. It will not happen just like that. Your and my going and appealing to the Prime Minister or opposition leader saying that India is going to go to dogs, please change it, they will not bother. Because what they want is to get elected at any cost. Therefore, you have to look much deeper and find alternative approaches.
Consider I want to be a political volunteer. Just consider the fact. Now, the country is undergoing many changes now. Recently, Delhi attack many came out to the streets. And 1 year before, called by Anna Hazare, many came to the streets. But the day before election, how can we make these concerns? Now, at the end of before the day of election, people get into another conclusion, like something they see in those last 1 month only, not the things undergone in the last 5 years. How can we, as a political volunteer, just I want to be a political person, as a candidate, how can we, from the booth level, I can consider the points and make me elected?
My appeal is, don't be too obsessed with elections at this stage. Because no matter who is contesting, outside the traditional parties, it's going to be very, very difficult to get political successes. If I'm the only person elected in the whole country outside the mainstream parties, then don't think it will happen easily tomorrow. Let's first acknowledge it. Because there are systemic constraints. We'll fight for that, we'll keep at it, we'll push the boundaries, but don't expect dramatic short-term victories. Be prepared for that. Because that's the way our system is, our culture is, our electoral system is. But short of that, while you build a party in a different way, in a rational and balanced way, in a democratic and mature way, with leadership rising to the top by the dint of their capacity, not by the descent or the family background, etc., then you are setting an example. But more important, you are actually coming out with alternative options. What is the answer for electricity? How do you improve the delivery of services? How do you do something else that actually matters to people? Make it part of the discourse. Increasingly mobilize public opinion in a constructive and creative way. Make it part of the discourse. And third, you understand the bigger changes required and become partner in that change. Even as you work electorally and politically, that's not enough, because that will not yield dividends in the short term. In another situation, another country, that would be enough. But we have some huge barriers. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. Therefore, you keep electoral things in mind, but don't worry about that. Don't judge your short-term results with electoral outcomes alone. You have to think of many other things which go into nation building, which go into genuine politics and sensible politics. And in time, suddenly things will change. For instance, right now, we are working very hard to make the national parties realize that their own self-interest lies in changing electoral system. And luckily that's achievable because the Constitution permits it. Within the Constitution, without changing the Constitution, by a simple change of law and procedure, you can actually dramatically change the political outcomes in the country. Now, how do you create the kind of synergy required to make that happen? That's what we must focus on. How do you make school education deliver much better for our poor people so that the outcomes actually are good in terms of education? How do you do something else in terms of your ward? How do you make the Service Guarantee Act work at the grassroots level so that people get the services? Because what is it that you seek ultimately after getting elected? To deliver? So without being elected also, you can focus on how to ensure delivery and improve the quality of governance simultaneously. If you say one thing, that if I am elected or my people are elected, I am successful, otherwise I am not successful, then you are creating a situation which is impossible in the short term. Okay?
Study of like independent like election commission, which is now doing just conducting elections.
No, election commission is independent, there is no doubt about that, but that's not enough because the election commission can only enforce the laws prevailing. That too up to a point. For instance, it is illegal to bribe a voter, it's illegal to take money and vote. But who can really stop it?
I am saying
If the fellow who gives money and the fellow who is taking money both are happy, you think all the policemen in the country can really save the situation? So there are limitations. Election Commission is not notwithstanding our views, it's not some mighty omnipotent body. It's actually more powerful than anywhere else in the country. But that's not enough. For systemic problems, the commission cannot be a solution.
So one should educate all the people of the country about democracy. Otherwise, we will think like
That's part
our
of it.
perception is